Hey gang, we have a story to share with you that was really inspiring to us. So if I may, I want you to think back to a moment to 1945. It was the end of one war and the beginning of another. This war was different though. It was the war of firsts. First in space, first in Olympic ice hockey, and the first to break new ground. Despite many failed attempts and some ending tragically in 1945, the U.S. focused their efforts on achieving the impossible. They were going to fly faster than the speed of sound. No vehicle had ever crossed this line. In fact, it seemed that the closer that anyone got, the more resistance they had met. Many attempts ended in the plane literally shaking itself to pieces. And how did we achieve such a feat back then? By setting a goal that seemed impossible. We chose the date, October 14th, 1947 as the target. We assembled support crew, engineers, mechanics, physicians, ground crew, radio operators, and a 24-year-old pilot named Chuck Yeager. And I don't know what you were doing at 24, but I sure as heck wasn't making history. Bell Aircraft Corporation had built the X-1 rocket-powered plane, and the X-1 was a small, bullet-shaped plane. It was the smallest plane built that could hold the largest engine possible to accomplish this endeavor. As it turned out, the only way for the X-1 to have enough fuel for the trip was to mount it on a larger plane called the B-29, and that would take it to altitude. Now, after years of works, the stage was finally set. Media crews from all around the world arrived to witness this historic flight. Then, on October 12th, 2 days before the flight, Chuck Yeager was in an accident. He was thrown from a horse, and he broke 2 ribs. How many of us would have quit right then? How many of us would have said, clearly the expectation for us is to not go fly a plane with 2 broken ribs? Not Yeager. He knew the goal, and it was non-negotiable. He didn't even tell anyone about the injury. Due to the injury, he wasn't able to close the cockpit door, so what did he do? He sawed the handle off of a broomstick and used that to close and lock the door. Team, that's commitment. Finally, the day arrived, and early in the morning, Yeager and the X-1 were loaded onto the B-29 bomber and on their way to make history. At 26,000 feet, Yeager and the X-1 were released from the bomber. As he accelerated away from the bomber, he started to call out his speed on the radio to those listening on the ground: 500, 550, 600 miles an hour. He called out 610, 620. The shaking is getting pretty bad up here, he said. The gauges are starting to break. This is the moment it would have been so easy to back off the throttle and go back home. Fear was everywhere in the cockpit with Yeager, and what did the ground crew say back to him in this moment? This plane was built for this moment. You were built for this moment. Keep going. Yeager took a deep breath, put his trust in the design and the designer, and then he pushed the throttle forward. 640, 650, static, and then silence. And then the world heard a noise that they had never heard before. Boom! They all stood in shock. Yeager's wife started crying, not knowing what the noise meant. And then after several seconds, we hear Yeager's voice. 670, 680. He had made it. This day of faith over fear was a historic day in aviation history, our country, and quite frankly, the world. Yeager flew at Mach 1 for 7 minutes before returning. And the interesting point is, on the other side of Mach 1, the flight was smooth. What's the moral of the story? You'll hit bumps, the gauges may even break, and can I remind you today, you were built for this. Keep going. No one succeeds alone. He had 6 different professions on the ground, coaching him and guiding him. And let me ask you this, just like Yeager, who's your coach having you throttle down to accomplish things that you didn't think that you could accomplish? I know I have a coach. I strongly suggest you do the same. Please look into it. It'll change your life. Thanks for listening to the story.